we're talking about handfuls on purpose, which is taken straight out of the scripture that we're talking about. So Ruth and Naomi moved back to Bethlehem. This is complicated on so many levels. One, they're widowed. Two, she's from Moab. Ruth is associating herself with this. They're not to intertwine their people. There's just all sorts of conflict and things like this. It's a conflict. They were poor. They had no money. There was no welfare system. They couldn't just sign up for food stamps and things. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And then that's when we paused last week and we went into the history of the story and all that, and went through and talked about how Boaz means strength, and he is also a type of Christ. This story, this illustration of redemption, just like Joshua was. And Ruth was a Moabitess and said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean the ears of corn after those whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, go, my daughter. Now you got to understand during their time that this was a natural thing to do. If you were hungry and you didn't have money, you didn't have possessions, you didn't have all those things, they would go glean. They would go to the fields and they would just pick up the scraps. That's how we would put it. Just they would, whatever was left behind. And this was the law of their land. They had to leave it behind. They couldn't go up and pick up the scraps. This was kind of a way of taking care of their widows and their poor. And God commanded them to leave the corners of the field. When you shall reap of the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field. There shalt thou gather the gleanings of the harvest. Thou shalt not glean the vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of the vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Isn't it awesome how God has a plan to provide? You know, even for the poor and everything like that, God has a plan to provide, and God is a God of provision. And he was telling them that you would leave it behind on purpose. And so you can imagine, as they're on their journey back, and Ruth not knowing the history of that, and then walking into the city and saying, what are we going to do? Well, there's a plan. Our God has this plan to provide for us. What is that? Well, one of us can go out into the fields and we can glean the leftovers. And it's like, okay, but I can't do it. You can imagine Naomi thinking, I'm an older lady. I couldn't handle being out there all day long to pick it up, because it's not a matter of just getting handfuls of it. It's a matter of just getting scraps of it. So they'd have to be out in the fields forever just picking up the scraps. And Ruth and them had this conversation, because you could tell that when she said, I will go and I'll do this, and I'll fight and go into the field to do this, there had to be some sort of conversation of, Ruth, you're going to have to be the one to do it. Now, you guys just tell me, from what we know, was this going to be an easy job? I'm not talking about physically doing this. I'm talking about being a Moabite woman and walking out there with the children of Israel and mixing yourself and being this outcast. It would not be an easy job. But that's the whole point of this story, guys. It's a matter of how God is in the details. And God is in the story of restoration. And it's cool how God had a plan for all this. And she went, she came, and she gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was light on the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. She got up and she went out. She went out to take care of their needs, and with the idea that God would take care of this. But I want you guys to see that there's two parts of this, and I think this is important to understand. It wasn't a matter of just God providing. It was a matter of one of them had to get up and go do the work. And I think that's important for us to understand in our culture. It's like faith without works is dead. God provides, but it takes work and effort and sacrifice. And it's said that this didn't just happen, that she ends up in this field. I want you guys to see, we talked about the providence of God, of how things can be falling apart or look like they don't add up, and how God is in the details. And at the beginning of your story, when you're putting it all in place, you're going to be like, well, that doesn't make sense, and that's not going to work out, and that's a mess, and I don't know, whatever. But God works in the details in ways that you're not going to understand. God works in the mess. You just put that in your mind. God works in the messes. God works in ways that don't make sense to us. And the Bible says the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. He delighteth in his ways. It's probably the number one verse that I use when I'm counseling with people. It's like, well, how am I going to get there? And how is this going to work out? I said, you know what the Bible says? The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Tell me, you guys speak back to me. Help me understand. You guys be my counselors in a minute. How is that significant? What advice, what teaching is God giving us about the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord? Think about the word. It's not the path. It's the steps. It's literally, what am I supposed to do today? It's just like, this is as far as God's asking you to take it. It's just, get up and follow God and pray about the decision and show up for work and show up on time. It's just like the little things. God works in the little things. God, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. God works in the details of this. We can see that in this story. And it says on perhaps, it's like, it wasn't just an accident that Ruth ended up in this field. It wasn't an accident at all. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said unto the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless thee. I think this is cool too. How many of you guys have ever been to one of the plays that we've done in the past, either Sight and Sound Theater or up there in Amish country for these plays of Ruth, okay? And if you've ever been there, this is so cool for them to kind of demonstrate what this was like. There was a place of joy, okay? And when them putting this in here, you can imagine she's expecting to be this outcast, and her people were all about the false gods, and there was a lot of just chaos that was involved in that. And Boaz steps into the thing, and it says this big greeting, the Lord be with you. And they answered and said, the Lord bless thee. Can you imagine this atmosphere that she's in, that this is different? And I want you guys to see this. This isn't a matter of you take this outside, this woman that came from this broken culture and false gods, and she steps into help me out with this word, okay? Just hear my heart. She steps into the church. You guys know what I mean by that? You say, no, it was a field. Like, no. She stepped into a place of God's people. What did she experience? What would she say this was like to like step into this? And the first greeting is like, oh man, this guy's going to kick me out. I don't know what's going to happen. And he comes in, this greeting is like, the Lord be with you. And everybody rises up and says, bless the name of the Lord. It's just this atmosphere of joy, of happiness. Then said Boaz to the servants that was set over the reapers, who damsel is this? Boaz came out to meet the workers, and he notices Ruth. Now, why is that? I mean, there could be a number of reasons. I mean, she was probably a pretty lady. Maybe it was just the fact that he was a single guy, and he starts asking. It's like, when it comes to that, maybe it was that, or maybe a fact that he realized that she was Moabite. Whatever it is, he was inquisitive. And the servant was set over the reapers, answered and said, the Moabitess damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. So he introduces it that she's the woman from Moab, and she came and asked. This is significant too, because we're seeing the heart of Ruth. She didn't come in demanding whatsoever, and you say, why does that matter? Because according to the law, she had the rights to be there. Well, we just read that. According to their law, she had the rights to be there. But she didn't just play that card. She comes in, and she's asked permission to be there. And the Bible says that her reputation, and I think this is so significant, her reputation is, as they said, Boaz, let me tell you, that woman has worked morning till night, just gleaning the fields. And when it says in there, and it says that tarried little in the house, like little, she has taken so little breaks of theirs. She's just working hard. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. And she came and hath continued morning till night. She could have just explained this away of saying that she had the right, but she approaches this with this level of humility. And then Boaz approaches Ruth. And this is that divine encounter you can see that God was in the details of. Remember, if you go back to the beginning of this, and I want you to imagine this. Ruth is out. She's not texting Naomi, okay? You can imagine sending Ruth out the first day. You just let your mind imagine like this. And she's like, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you want to do this? No, remember what you're going to say. You're going to be nice, and you're going to introduce yourself and stand back behind the other ladies. And you want them pushing you out because you're a Moabite woman. And you can imagine just built up, and she's probably pacing all day. Oh, I hope this works out. Hope she comes home with a little bit. I hope we don't go hungry. Man, I should have went with her. I should have introduced her to people. You know, they're real people. This would have been a real situation. And you can see God's working in all the details. And you say, why? Do you guys remember the lesson before last when we got into the idea of the word repent and return? When we get back on track of doing the right things, God blesses. Yes. God blesses. And this Sunday, I'm preaching on the breastplate of righteousness. And just having an understanding that we stand in the righteousness of God. And I'm not going to preach my message on Sunday because then you guys would just skip on Sunday. So I'm just giving you the cliff notes. But then God calls us to live out the righteousness of God. And you just say, well, it's a matter of I can and cannot do certain things. No, it's a matter about living in the righteousness or in the plans or in the direction that God has put us on. There is joy in that. There's joy in doing the right things. And after both of them return back to God and they both look to God as their provider, God begins to bless. And then Boaz said to Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter, go and glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. He comes up to her and says, this is what I want you to do. And I want you guys to see just the grace of God involved in this. Did she deserve this? Absolutely not. But was God pouring out grace? In so many ways. Boaz approaches her. You can imagine like this guy being this wealthy businessman and understanding what was going through her mind. And as he approaches her, he says, no, don't leave. I want you to keep gleaning this field. I want you to return. I want this to be the place that you get provided for. Now, obviously, they end up falling in love. I hate to give away the end of the story. It's like they fall in love. It's a cool Bible story. It's a cool love story, whatever. But can we just pause for a minute, time out? Let's just talk about who was his mother? Okay. He shouldn't have been there himself. Do you guys understand? He's only standing there because of the grace of God that was bestowed upon him. And when you start realizing that I don't deserve what I have, it's only by the grace of God I am who I am and where I'm at. It changes your perspective when you see somebody that's an outcast or a Moabite to not look at her as like, well, she doesn't deserve to be here. He's thinking, I'm going to treat her the way that God's people treated my mom. It changes things. Man, to be saved by grace, I think we can get so caught up in what we have that we don't continue to share what we have. We get so consumed with the blessing and the joy of grace that we don't realize that others need it too. We are messengers of grace. He was saying, stay here, glean here, just pouring out this grace on this woman that was not expecting this. Now, two things that I put in your notes that I want you to notice. Notice, number one, how God's people respond to her. Number two, what God does for her. And then you just say, well, I thought we were just studying, the history of the Israelites and things like that. No, we're talking about what we're called to be as Christians. We're talking about how different we should be when it comes to God's people. It's not just about gleaning the harvest. There's a lot more going on because we're seeing the heart and the character of God. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap. Go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? When thou art athirst, go unto the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. Now I'm telling you, this is not standard. What is the standard according to the Levitical law? What are they supposed to do? Leave scraps. Let them take it. Do you know what grace does? Mercy is withholding punishment that is deserved. Grace is giving you what you don't deserve. And what we're seeing now, he comes up to her and says, I've already instructed my men. They're not to tell you to go away. I don't care. You have full access to my fields to be able to glean. And he said, the second thing, when you get thirsty, I want you to go to the tent and I want you to be able to get refreshed with out of the same that my servants have. You think about how intentional he is being, about how he's showing his love and kindness and looking after and protecting her in this way. And I want you here. You belong here. This is huge, everything that he's doing and saying through this. And then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? I mean, she's literally admitting it. She's not like, you know who I am. You know I'm from Moab. You know I don't deserve to be here. It's just this unexpected response that she's getting. And I know I keep saying this and reiterating, I think people should be blown away from the kindness of God's people. I think it should be, we should go out of our way on Sundays to greet people that come in. that don't dress like us, that don't look like us, that don't act like us, that don't know where to stand, what to sit, or how to. It just should not be that. They should be poured out grace on them for just being people that are loved by God, and we love them to show them that they're loved by God. And this theme of grace is throughout the entire Bible. And why? Because when they experience grace, they're experiencing God, because God is a God of grace. It's something more than He gives. It's who He is. It should be part of the DNA of us as Christians. And think about this. Let's go to the New Testament. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearers. Think about the application of that. It says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying. What does the word edifying mean? It builds up. It's like the words that come out of your mouth. And you're just like, well, let's just take the illustration of a waitress, because let's be honest, anybody that goes to a restaurant hungry, you want your rolls out there, you want your chips and salsa. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to dare go a minute without my drink being full. And you can say that you love Jesus and come straight from church and praising God for the last hour and a half, and you can be the biggest jerk in a restaurant. You guys know what I'm talking about. We've all been there. And either you've been with people that are like that, or maybe you've had that reputation of being like that in your past. You're saying, well, if you want that tip, then they should have done better, or served me more, or filled my drink, or whatever. Let's that ye might minister grace. Do you understand a minister or a deliverer, okay? It's like we receive the grace of God, and what our job is literally to give them what they don't deserve. And this should be the mindset and the attitude of all of us as Christians. Our words should minister. And if they apologize saying, I'm so sorry, we're so busy, I'll get to you in a minute or whatever, I'm so sorry. Man, we say, no, you're doing fine. That's when we say, when we're about to pray, is there something that I can pray with you about, and go out of your way to lift them up? John 1:14, and I know I'm going deep on this, but I think the application is important. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. That's Jesus. And we beheld, we saw, we experienced the glory of God, the glory of the only begotten of the Father. It was full of what? It's full of grace and truth. And we're so much about the truth. The truth is you shouldn't live that way, and that's ungodly, and blah, blah, blah. But it's also, as much as it's full of truth, it's also full of grace. And the fullness we all received. And grace for grace. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. Man, you study the message of Jesus Christ. You see Him going to the lepers and the outcasts and the Samaritan woman and all these others. Thomas and Peter and sinners and outcasts and just all the ones that were like that. He just loved on them. Grace is the act of showing love, kindness, and care even when they have done nothing to earn it or deserve it. We are to deliver that. Grace in action. Watch this. Watch Boaz be this symbol and visual of Christ, or how we should treat the outcast. And Boaz answered and said unto her, it had been fully showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come to the people which thou knowest not thereof. You think about what he's saying about them, saying, man, I've heard your reputation. And Ruth had an outstanding reputation. Actually, this is one of the verses that we read ahead and we talked about before. And it's cool because we're going to come back to this here in a minute next week and tie the details of the closing of the story to this. But she had this reputation. He says to her, I know what you've done. I know that Naomi, which was his relative, that at the time Ruth didn't realize that. I know what you've done for that. And God's literally blessing her and reminding her of her faithfulness. Do you guys know sometimes Christians that are especially new just need to know that God sees them and that other people see them and you see the good in their life? That they need to be reminded, hey, you've been faithful to church. I see that. Man, I see how you worship. I see how you serve. I see how you give of yourself. Man, I just want you to know that you have touched my heart. You have blessed me. Because they're used to saying it in the opposite way, but when they get it themselves from somebody that is a mature Christian that they look up to, it makes a difference. The Lord recompense. The Lord bless you. Lord, sees thy work, and a full reward be given unto thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Now, I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to say, first of all, he acknowledges that she's been saved, under whose wings thou art come to trust. It's her testimony. And the thing is, they're no longer looking at her as a Moabite woman, but as a Christian. You guys know what I mean by that Old Testament sense of this, of somebody that is now a follower of Jehovah God. And God begins to use Boaz to encourage and minister grace to the hearers is what he's doing through this. It's powerful. Then she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me, and that thou hast spoken friendly unto thy handmaid. Though I be not unto one of thine handmaids, let me find favor, or because I have found favor. She was looked at as somebody that was equal to them. And she's saying, I just want to be different. I want to be viewed different. Guys, you know, one of the most powerful things that we heard on Sunday, I don't know how many of you guys were here on Sunday, was the testimony of Craig. Did you guys see that online or whatever? And the whole thing was great about how he talked about how God has changed his life and things like that. But I thought one of the most powerful things was at the end, when Chief York was at the end, and he turns to him and he says, you know that story you told me about your name? And he said, what do you mean about my name? He said about how the name Fields has been recognized as something that's not great in the community. And Craig got a little choked up and he just said, I just want my name to represent something different. And that's this whole story that she's saying, if I found favor in there, let me step up to the plate. Let me be known as a Christian. Let me be known as a follower of God. And you guys know, when I say the word Christian in this context, you know what I mean by that, of the application to us. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither, and eat the bread, and dip the morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and sufficed, and left. Okay. Does anybody see the progression of how God is blessing her? Okay, let's pause for a minute. What is Naomi doing? Naomi's over here going, I hope she comes back with something. If she could see Ruth, Ruth is sitting under the tent, her glass of water, her pile of barley sitting there, and she's sitting there eating the lunch with all the workers. You're saying she didn't deserve that. She went from being an outcast to being blessed beyond description of this. She's probably sitting there as she's eating with all of them thinking, what is happening here? And by the way, remember, they were poor. They were there just trying to glean scraps just to eat something. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not, and let her fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her. Leave them, that she may glean of them, and rebuke her not. This is where probably one of the most famous verses in the Bible when it comes to the story of Ruth is right here. It's a matter, this is what I want you to do. She's going to think that she's trying to follow the wagons and the servants as they're harvesting the barley or whatever. And she's going to be like going for all these little scraps. You guys know what I'm talking about? She's looking for the scraps. And then he says, she's to get closer, okay? She doesn't have to be in the corners of this. She gets to be right out in the middle of the action. As she gets closer, I want you just to take fistfuls, okay, handfuls on purpose and just throw it out there. You can imagine Ruth going, whoa, what is this? And she picks it up and she puts it in her basket or whatever, and she just thinks it's raining blessings from heaven, and it is. But guys, I don't think I have to explain this. I think everybody's picking up on the message of this, of what's going on. Who is dropping the handfuls of purpose or on purpose? Who is dropping those things? It's God. They are in Bethlehem, the house of bread. They are following and serving, and Boaz is explaining, I'm only doing what God has stirred my heart to do. And I think it is so powerful of how God works in just those handfuls on purpose, those handfuls of blessings, those handfuls of unexpected goodness of God. And I think we could probably pause in the service right now and just spend the rest of the time saying, tell me stories. And we could probably talk till midnight talking about stories of how God does that. God is in the details. God has things worked out in ways that you could have never imagined. And I'm telling you, walking into the story with Ruth and Naomi, probably thinking, I hope we just don't get rejected, to what's about to happen. Does anybody know the rest of the story about what's in this chapter or whatever? It's like just give me a hint so I know that. Okay, all right. So she goes from this. It just gets better. So she gleaned in the field until even and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. She goes and she beats out the barley. If anybody knows the story of this, so and I'm not good at explaining this, whatever, but it's contained in the stalk of that, and they had to beat it out to actually get what you would actually make the meal out of or the bread out of, whatever. So you can imagine as she's out there, she's gleaning all the stalks of this and the heads and all the weeds or whatever, the big parts of it that you are just pointless to that. You can imagine how much of this was there. And somehow she gets brought to this threshing floor where they go up and she can beat out the barley to where now she's now processing it. Now, the widows wouldn't have been able to do something like that. They would have been like, you've got your scraps, just get out of here and go home. She is now processing it to where now she's able to take an abundance home and without having to work or sweat over it, of having to drag this all back. This just keeps getting deeper and deeper with the blessings of God. Ephah of barley, an ephah is the ancient Hebrew unit of dry measure, is about 1 bushel or about 35 liters. Would have been like 5 to 9 gallons of barley. That would have been enough to feed 2 people for a week. We're not talking scraps anymore, guys. We're talking about pressed down, running over. Is how God blesses and things like this. Application. You can't see how God's working, but God's working. And she took it up, went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw it that she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave it to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. So she not only brought home the barley, she brought home the scraps or the leftovers of the lunch. And her mother-in-law said unto her, Where hast thou gleaned today? You can imagine, probably like, you didn't steal this, did you? like, what is going on here? And where wroughtest thou? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had brought and said, The man's name whom I have brought today is Boaz. This would have been one of those mic drop moments, okay? Because you could have imagined, we are related to this guy. We know this guy. What are the odds? And that verse that says, just by perhaps, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a coincidence. God had lined this up. God was in the detail of this. Was the providence of God that we talked about in lesson number 1. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, This man is near kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. This was no accident. This was God working in the details. And Ruth tells Naomi of Boaz's offer. And Ruth the Moabitess said, He said unto me also that thou shalt keep fast by young men until they have ended all my harvest. Said literally, in translation of that, literally was like, he said I could come back. How long? Like tomorrow you get to come back? She says, until we're done harvesting. Like what? You can imagine just the rejoicing going around through these 2 ladies. And Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that thou go out to his maidens, that they may meet thee not in any other field. Said, we're not going anywhere else. This is going to be it from here on out. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. Naomi knew this was good. Now you can imagine, she's probably thinking in the back of her mind, I can see the bigger picture that God's doing a whole lot more than we can see, that God was doing something through his kinsman. And she probably didn't understand. Ruth probably had no idea of what was going on with this. But you have to understand that they had no property. They had none of the blessings. They were poor without anything to carry on their name. But Naomi's putting the pieces together. And you can imagine, let me just tell you, has anybody ever tried to fix somebody up or set somebody up? You guys help me out here. If you ever tried to do that. But you can imagine how Naomi is now realizing, okay, there's something happening here. They go through this whole season, and Boaz is pouring out blessing upon blessing and grace upon grace, that this is no longer than us just surviving. And guys, God's not about us just trying to keep our head above water. God is a God of blessings and provision in bigger ways. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee? The word rest means shelter, husband, home, future. Do you not understand that you can't just live the rest of your life gleaning the fields and picking up scraps? Said, shall I not seek rest for thee, that they might be well with thee? Naomi begins to come up with a plan. And now is not Boaz our kindred, whose maiden thou wast? You have been working for Boaz as a servant girl. And this entire time, God has been working behind the scenes. And I'm gonna go ahead and start wrapping this up, because we're gonna get into another part of this, and that I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for. And by law, the Jewish law was if somebody was to die, that there was different laws that would take place. Deuteronomy 25 verse 5. If brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no children, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her and shall take her to be wife and perform the duty of a husband, brother unto her. Let me just say, thank God this is not a thing today. Let me just say that right now. And verse 2, and now when Boaz our kindred, whose maidens thou was, behold, winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. So they had this thing that was, you guys got to understand, in the culture of that, they would do things that would not make sense to us. So in the culture that I grew up in, you guys know this, I grew up in Alabama. I am a redneck. I am a southerner. I am all of the above. I worked on a chicken farm. I did all the weird stuff that farmers did. I baled hay for a living when I was a kid. That's how I got my start in doing things like that. I drove tractors. I caught chickens at night. I did all the things. And if I was to tell you different things, reasons that we did things, it would not make sense. And for us to look at this and say, this is just a weird story, it wasn't a weird story if you take it in the context of their culture. So we used to go out at night, and I got paid $10 an hour. If you guys don't think that is not big money, let me tell you, in a day and age that when I first got my first job at Winn-Dixie, that also makes me sound like a redneck. I got my first official job at Winn-Dixie, and I packed groceries. I bagged groceries. And I got $4.25 an hour, and I thought I was killing it. I'm going to tell you guys right now. But at the same time, I got hired by farmers to bale hay for $10 an hour, okay, which was big, big money, especially for 13, 14, 15-year-olds when I was that age. And we would do it at night. We would literally drive to the houses. We would get on these giant trailers, and they would be hauled by the tractors or the trucks or whatever. They would bale the hay, and we would do it at night. And if you went down there, they had these big spotlights on the back of the trucks that would light it up. Does anybody know why we would do that? We lived in Alabama, and it was hot. And they would pay us at night to haul the hay because you could do it without passing out. The other thing that we would do is they would try to get it in the barn before it got wet. If you put bales of hay that got wet in the barn, it would mold. So it would cause issues. So if they baled it, they would call us out, put on the spotlights, and we would do that. So for people thinking that they would just drive by and like, look at all those crazy redneck boys out there throwing hay in the middle of the night. No, that was a culture thing that we did. So at the end of the season, they would thresh out the barley. They would beat it and separate it. They would take these pieces of material, they would throw it up, and the wind would come and blow away all the dust or the debris or the scraps of it, and then the barley would fall back down, and they would harvest it that way. They would do this at night. And one of the things that they would do is, as they collected the piles, that was their assets, that was their money, that was their profits. And they would take turns sleeping at the threshing fields at night. And this is what they were talking about. And it wouldn't make sense because it wasn't part of their culture. So Naomi has this plan when he found out that Boaz would be sleeping out there at night. This is the love story aspect of this whole thing. And it is beautiful and it is powerful. And it is something that God has given us as an illustration of the grace of God and God being our Redeemer.